Welcome to another episode of Top Shot, in which we interview a very distinguished personality who talk to us about issues which concern you and me, the issues which are really important for our society, our country, our people, and that's what we do every week. This week we have a very distinguished person, Mr. Valmik Thapar. Valmik, welcome to this program.
Well,
in fact, whenever I think about you, I think about tiger. Why is that?
that's probably because I've spent 33 years following the tail of the tiger in terms of documenting its natural history and then fighting for its survival with all the governments that have come and gone. So my life is totally tiger-centric.
But then, having done all this for so many years, are you a happy man today? You think that tigers are safer than what they were, or they are threatened than what they were ever any time in the past?
In my opinion, the tiger is in its worst state today. I've never been in a scenario where it's so bad. The population has fallen, the forests are degraded, the habitat is going, and it's our national animal. It's a symbol of the very beauty of India's nature. We are a country endowed with 16 types of climatic forest, with the Himalayas, the desert, the coral reefs, and all the forest land. And we have to find a way to keep it alive, and the tiger is symbolic of that, sir. The moment it's an emergency, I call it the tiger emergency that has never hit India, the like it has.
But normally people, there is always a confusion in the minds of the people that when you talk about tiger, why it's so important? Because normally, let me just put this question in a proper perspective, because people think that I live in forest for so many years and now tiger is being protected and I am being evicted. Why do you think this animal-male conflict, is it something which can be avoided, can be handled? Why it should really be that way?
I think the tiger is symbolic of natural India, the natural world. We have 300 rivers and perennial streams that are born in the forests of the tiger, which give water to more than 100 million people. So you have a great symbol that requires, I think, the very best protection. Unfortunately, people and tigers don't coexist, because the tiger likes eating cows and buffaloes, and when it kills cows and buffaloes, it comes into conflict with people, and the people will then try to kill the tiger to take revenge. So what we have to do in this country is to have the best land use policy, where you have forests without people, and you have to decide how many tigers can survive there, whether it's 500, 1,000, 2,000, but keep them free of people, keep them inviolate, keep them completely without human disturbance, and then work very hard where you have people and forests. Give everybody the rights they deserve, but don't mix the issues. In India, we make a khichdi, and we have to prevent this khichdi from coming so that both can live in freedom, both can live happily. The wildlife of India, which is a part of our constitution, as well as the tribals and forest dwellers who require great benefits from our country. But don't mix the issues.
So basically what you're trying to say is that, in fact, if tiger exists in wild and he's safe there, it also gives us a guarantee outside people that the ecosystem is in good shape, we'll get water flows eventually.
Absolutely.
So how do you actually explain it to the common people that tiger's existence in wild is an assurance of safety for him outside the forest?
I think you have to explain it through education awareness, through media campaigns, and remind people of the cultural heritage of this country. The tiger was always symbolic of the fertility of crops. People believed in India 100 years ago that when you have the crops in the field, the tiger comes and kills the wild boar and the deer so that they don't eat the crops. They worshipped the tiger in India. It was the vehicle of Durga and the Devi because it brought light on earth. I think you have to go back to the heritage of all the communities and their beliefs and then create an awareness as the importance of this animal.
So therefore, what actually eventually, if the tigers disappear, that means the human beings will disappear from outside the forest one day or the other, because that means the ecosystem is crumbling. The tiger disappearance actually gives us a signal that ecosystem inside the forest is crumbling. That is going to have a huge impact outside the forest, and therefore the human beings will disappear one day.
I believe that, but people say that's an extremist view, but I still hold that while the tiger is alive, there's a quality in human life. When the tiger goes, the forests of India will go. The water reservoirs of India will go. There are places like Kudramukh where 3 different rivers are born. There's the Narmada, which in Amarkantak, which is the forests of the tiger. The Narmada flows from there. When you desertify these lands, you lose water and a quality of life. So the tiger to me is symbolic of a quality of life, of a good life that human beings lead. And we have to respect it and understand that it also has a right to survive. It's not just human beings. We live in a larger ecosystem where everyone plays a role. Even the butterfly and the bee and the insect play a role. So when you save the tiger, you save the entire forest system, from the smallest insect to all the big animals, be it elephants, be it rhinos, be it deer, be it antelope. So the tiger is a focus of the entire ecological system, and I think we have to believe this politically. We have to have the political wisdom across all political parties to say, yes, it is important to save it, and let's save it in the right way. Unfortunately, again, we don't understand the need of the tiger. When we create a plan to save the tiger, we don't understand the need of the tiger. We look at the need of the forest dweller. This is confusing the issue, because the tiger then doesn't get the benefit of intervention. So it loses. Poachers come in, they take tiger skins, they take tiger bones. We don't have an anti-poaching force. So we require to understand, what does the tiger need? When a tiger walks, what does it need?
So you are talking about public awareness, and normally you talk about dwellers' rights, etc. Is it that dwellers have voting rights and the tiger doesn't have voting rights? Is that what is creating a problem? That tigers, if they were voters, probably would be paying more attention to them than to the other real causes?
I think that there's a great amount of education which is necessary, not just in local people who live in and around forests. Most of them believe that the forest should be worshipped. There are trees worshipped in India, there are worship sites, people believe in nature. But also the decision makers of today. Education and awareness should be in senior politicians, in senior bureaucrats, of how to get interventions right, how to do the balancing act in a country of 1.2 billion people. And that's the tough one. So yes, the tiger has no voting right. The people have the votes. So you have to be very careful how you create policy which is not just voter friendly, it should be nature friendly.
Yeah. And you talked about, you're making a very valid point of how actually this issue should be highlighted. Now, who should do the job? Is it not a job of the civil society and organization like yours to create that awareness?
Well, I left my organization in 2000 because of my pessimism. So I'm just an individual today. But I think it's civil society requires an engagement about the natural world, and the electronic media, the newspapers, all the NGOs and government institutions must come together as a collective to create that understanding. That will only happen when we have a mission statement, like we have a mission on water. We must have a mission on wildlife and forests. Why is it important? It should get the topmost agenda of any government. Unfortunately, it has not got this topmost agenda. The government has slumped. The political will in the last 4 or 5 years is absent to give it the topmost agenda. And till it gets the topmost agenda, we can't move forward. We are like a seesaw. When someone good is in place, we go high. Then something bad happens, we come down. And the tiger keeps suffering like the seesaw. So we require a major mission statement about saving the tiger and saving the forests of India. We don't have it as yet.
Yeah. Again, with the linkage between forest and tiger, because we want to maintain tigers in wild, and then they cannot live without a habitat, and habitat is going to be a real forest. Now, here in this budget, we had seen that finance minister talking about giving more money for the tiger protection, but not talked about forest at all. So do you think that we are also losing some sort of a proper holistic picture in this, wherein you lose the broader picture, the bigger picture, and therefore you may try to protect the forest, protect the tiger, but without forest it will not happen. So do you think we need a holistic approach in this?
I think a holistic approach is essential in a future vision. When the finance minister talked about giving 50 crores for tiger protection to a tiger force, it's at that moment he should have talked about the forests of the tiger, why they are important. We are very happy because it's the first time in the history of India that a finance minister mentioned the word tiger. But with tiger, you have to mention forest. Why? We don't protect tigers in isolation. When we say protect the tiger, it means protect the entire ecological system, the entire forests in which it walks. So governments must work towards this with a vision. Without the vision, without a holistic approach, nothing is going to be possible.
But again, talk about forest now. For example, we have already talked about in our forest policy that we need 1/3 area to be covered by forest. And we are nowhere near that.
Nowhere near that.
Now, one of the reasons for that is also growing human population, because more population would mean that forest land makes way for agricultural land, makes way for housing, makes way for so many other things. So do you think we need to control human population to increase tiger population?
I think it's very important to control human population, but today nobody talks about controlling human population. Very few political leaders talk about family planning. It's like a word not to be mentioned. I think it's very important. I think if India is to evolve both economically and keep nature alive, keep the natural world alive, we have to look at population growth. If we don't look at population growth, we can have a situation where the equation between people and land no longer has any balance. As it is, we have problems in agricultural land because people are being left with 1 biga or 1 acre to cultivate. It's no longer viable. But what will happen when you have a mass of 1 million people around a forest? They're not going to survive without taking over the forest. And then political leadership will say, no forest left in India, where should we go? To our neighboring countries. So we require good policy for the future, for the unborn Indian. We may have to make some sacrifices today as people living in India. But we are working towards the generation who's not born. For them, we have to keep the forests alive.
Yeah. And I think that's very important that we have to look at for a future generation. Now people say that the poaching of tiger is one of the major problems in India because we are seeing that tiger population dwindling because of course the prey base is becoming smaller, but more than that, poaching actually is one of the major causes. Now there are people who say that to avoid poaching, we can breed tigers in captivity, then use that tiger population to sell the tiger parts to cater to this demand, because the market is actually there for the tiger parts, and if you don't supply that, there will be poaching taking place. Do you subscribe to this type of argument?
I think it's the most disgusting. No sides that it requires tiger farms, it's the end of the tiger. You'll have tigers in tiger farms, but there will be no wild tiger. There will be no forests of the tiger because everybody will be exploiting and making money of tigers. So you'll have drive-in enclosures where people will drive in and see tigers in their pens like they see dogs, but those are not real tigers. You know that a zoo tiger or a captive tiger, if you throw it in a forest, even a spotted deer will kill it because it is not trained by the mother. It's not lived in the wild. It doesn't have the 2-year training that a mother gives it. So one aspect is totally separate. Never touch tiger farming in this country, because then every tiger in the forest will be killed by the poacher. He'll carry the bag of bones, cross the border into Nepal, and it will be legal. Because China would have a legal trade with tiger farms, India would have tiger farms. The mix, the grey area of the law will be totally abused in this. So it should never happen in India. To me, it's ethically, morally, and at a principle level, the worst thing that we can subscribe to.
In fact, this would also breed a possibility of, today what we are saying is that we try to kill the market for tiger parts, and that's why there is a CITES, which is even internationally there's a campaign which is going on to prevent that. The tiger breeding in captivity and then selling the parts to the market would mean that we will not be able to distinguish between what is coming from the wild and what is coming here. Then we are actually encouraging now the use of that. In fact, we should try to kill the use of tiger parts itself to make this happen. So that's what we are trying to say.
I am trying to say that the tiger is our national animal, but it is the most charismatic species of the planet, and all the countries of the world, through even a UN charter, should come together and say, this animal will not be farmed, this animal will be kept alive, because 600 million children every year go to zoos to see this animal. That is its public appeal, and we in India should be on a mission to get the entire world to sign a charter saying save the animal, save its forest. The future of mankind is dependent on this fact.
And in fact, the point that you're making earlier, that it is not just a tiger which actually physically important, but what is important is that the habitat in which he lives. The habitat is important because that supports the ecosystem. The ecosystem is important for all the living beings on this planet to be alive.
Absolutely, so that's the balance.
That's right. So if you actually have another tigers, that doesn't mean that we have this place, because tigers in captivity are different than tigers in wild, because they don't provide that assurance in wild. What tigers provide assurance in wild, they don't provide that in captivity.
Absolutely, they're two different things. You see, in Europe, when they had their industrial revolutions 150 years ago, they cut all their forests down.
That's right.
Then they realized that they can't do without forests, so they planted all their forests back. But I call it a green desert. Europe has forests, but where are the animals? They have so many deer and so many pheasants that they open the shooting season to kill them, because they killed all the predators. They killed all the animals that create the balance. In India, we still have pristine forests, the very most beautiful forest. We have our predators, we have tigers, we have lions, we have leopards. Let's keep what we have alive. Why should we try and get rid of them? Why should we cut our forests to plant new forests? After all, if you take global warming and climate change, one of the key factors today is protect your forest, don't cut it down, make sure the carbon remains inside the forest. The minute you cut the tree, the carbon is released into the atmosphere. And there should be now incentives. I hope globally we create incentives for people to protect forests and plant forests in agricultural fields. It will be better to now in non-viable agricultural land plant trees. But where you have forests, don't allow them to be cut. Don't make the mistake that the Western civilization made. They made the critical mistake of cutting and replanting. Whereas we have primary, secondary and tertiary forests, medicinal plants. We have biodiversity like no one else is endowed on the planet, and we should be proud of it, and so proud of it that we protect it.
Talking about Western world having lost whatever they had and this natural wealth is no longer with them, do you think it is possible that those Westerners who are now thinking of protecting forest in India and also protecting tigers in India, could there be a collaboration between the two? Should some of the countries say that I will now take care of Ranthambore, somebody will say I will take care of Nagarhole, somebody else will say I will take care of Corbett Park. Do you think something like this is also a good idea? So that there will be international participation into this effort of conservation?
I think we have to look at new models. We have to meet up with Africa as a continent. Africa has every new model. They franchise land to other people from other countries. They have ecotourism models. They do lots of different things. We don't follow any new models. So we need to open our thinking cap, get new models going. I believe it's important to have collaborations. I believe we should be open about collaborations, but also involve our corporate world.
That's right.
We have new corporates who've grown. They must play a part in saving the forests of India, in looking at our national parks. They must turn green. Our corporate world must become green. If it doesn't become green, it's making a fatal mistake. So I think it's vital for the corporate world to be involved and engaged. Then create partnerships with the rest of the world. I have no problem with that. We all are on a common mission. It's a world mission to save the wilderness of a part of this planet. Like we saved Africa. Africa also had huge problems. But the world came together to keep Africa alive. Now India has huge problems with forests and wildlife. We can all sit together with a collectiveness to save it. But we shouldn't come into conflict. There's too much at stake to fight with each other. Let's fight to keep poachers out, timber mafias out, land mafias out. This should be our battle.
Talk about avoiding this conflict. How do you look at this tribal rights bill which is passed by the parliament and which is going to be law very soon? You think what impact it will have on tigers and forest and these conservation measures?
I am very, very disappointed in the tribal rights bill. I went before the joint parliamentary group who was working on the bill and expressed all my fears about it. You see, in the definition of forest, they include national park and sanctuary. National park and sanctuary includes all our elephant areas, rhino areas, tiger areas, lion and leopard areas. And I try to tell the joint parliamentary committee, keep national parks and sanctuaries out, because in these areas, man and people don't coexist. You can't give forest dweller or tribal a right where they come into conflict with an animal, because you're creating a war between the wild animal and the people there. But this was not listened to. So now we have a very complicated tribal rights bill. I don't know what future it will take. I know that by June, maybe a lot of land will be given out. There's another great tragedy, in my opinion, that has taken place. We've created a new category called forest dweller. What does forest dweller mean? If you're living near a forest, you will be a forest dweller. I can be a forest dweller. People who can prove 75 years of residency in or around a forest, and they have various parameters. I think we have to be very careful, because nature is more than gold or foreign exchange. It's not for us to fiddle with. It's not for us to destroy. We have to take solid decisions. How much can we use? How much land can we give rights to? How much we have to keep pristine because of water, wildlife, trees, medicinal plants. We have to take these tough decisions, and the tribal rights bill, in my opinion, failed to take tough decisions. So it's become very complicated. I believe there'll be a lot of fights, a lot of litigation. The courts will get choked with lots of cases. Who is a genuine forest dweller? Who is the genuine tribal? Who should get how much land?
I think Valmik will come back to what you're saying. Please don't go away. We'll take a short break. We are discussing with Mr. Valmik Thapar about the future of tiger, and linked to that, the future of humanity and how we should try to protect it. Don't go back. We'll come back soon after a short break. Thank you. So welcome back to this program of Top Shot, in which we are talking to Mr. Valmik Thapar, the person whose face looks like a tiger's face because he keeps talking about tiger. And in fact, he has been talking to me, and he was been talking in a very loud voice because he thinks that the tiger's voice is not heard, so at least his voice should be heard by the people. So let us go back to what Valmik is saying. You think this man and animal conflict, it is avoidable?
I think if it's good administration and governance, it's avoidable by creating good land use policy, by creating areas which are meant purely for the forest and nature to survive in, and by creating other areas where you benefit tribals who live inside forests. But this requires a commission to look at the whole map of India, go state by state and say this area is for wildlife, this can be used, rights can be given, here no rights can be given. We have to do this with the expertise in this country, and then it's possible. But I fear from my last 33 years of experience that we don't care too much about good governance. We don't create enough reform in governance, and therefore we suffer tremendously. That's my biggest problem.
But tell me, talking about tribal bills, which we were talking a little earlier before the break, the people who are proponents of this idea of tribal rights and tribal bill, which came in that form, they're saying that if you don't give land rights to people, it breeds the extremist activity like what we have in Naxalism. And that type of extremist activity eventually will anyway kill the forest, and it will just get the same problem which we are trying to address. So I think we can actually now, since law is already passed, should we try to moderate the implementation of it in a way that we can have both? We can provide rights to tribals, but at the same time protect forest and tigers?
You see, Mr. Prabhu, I made a suggestion. The Prime Minister held a meeting of wildlife activists and tribal activists. There were 8 of us with the Prime Minister, and we had 2 hours one-to-one discussing this. And I made a suggestion that we have 20% of forest land in India, 21%, 22%. Keep 6 to 7% completely free as much as you can for wildlife, water reservoirs, biodiversity, medicinal plants. The balance 16% give rights to all the tribals, give benefits to the tribals, give them land rights, work out a policy which is totally friendly to the people. Both then will gain. You're giving 60% of forest land to the people, you're keeping 30-40% as your treasure house for the unborn Indian. But the sad thing is that even though the Prime Minister was willing to listen, the activists who fight for the rights of tribals or people who are not understanding the issue were not willing to listen. So the entire forest land now is a part of the tribal rights bill, and that is a lack of understanding on those who propagate such legislation or the content of such legislation. They have not understood what we, as you call me a wildlife activist, but I think I'm an activist for people. What I suggest is for mankind. First mankind, but by saving forests you save mankind, what you said earlier. So this factor has not been understood. So I think that it requires a certain amendment in the tribal rights bill to make sure that our natural treasures don't get exploited by timber mafias or poaching mafias or land mafias. We are opening a land bank, and we have to have excellent enforcement and a clear area of what can be done and what can't be done. At the moment it's a grey area, and that's what a lot of people who supporters of the bill have not understood, and that to me is sad, because people should have the humility to learn, and there were enough people who worked in conservation who could go forward and explain the detail. We were never asked, except in the joint parliamentary committee where I went and gave my view for 1 hour. It's recorded there, and I said, please don't interfere with national parks and sanctuaries. Nobody should have rights here. You, me, anybody. It's not about rich and poor. It's about the future of a country.
So you are talking about some areas of forest should be out of bound for any human activity.
Totally.
That area, like normally when we go to a religious place, we can enter a religious place, but you can't enter a part of a religious place.
Sanctum sanctorium you can't enter.
So you are trying to talk about something like this?
Definitely. There's no choice. If you want to keep the pristineness of our wilderness for the future of mankind, you cannot give rights there.
But do you think then if we can communicate this part, because in the interest of tribals again, because tribals live on forest in some ways because they can get a forest produce, etc., etc. But if forest doesn't survive, even the tribals don't benefit.
Absolutely. That's the key. That if you fail in your mission to save the forest, you are destroying the culture and life of the tribal or forest dweller, whatever you call him. Where will he go? He'll have to migrate to the city. So by one stroke, by not understanding what is being said, You're allowing rights of anyone will come and prove that they have 75 years lived in a forest. It's not difficult in India to prove these things. So why create new categories of people who will have their own mafias inside? Everybody has a mafia. There's a mafia in a village, town, in a city. So we should create legislation and law that takes into account these details, that is dynamic. And therefore we must create safety amendments in the Tribal Rights Bill that keep parts of this forest of India sanctum for nobody to use. Even it's there for the next 30, 40, 50 years when a new generation grows up.
But that means there is some communication gap between the activists who are fighting for the rights of tiger and the rights for the tribals?
I agree with you. There is a big communication gap. There's unnecessary conflict. There's a lack of understanding. Nobody is actually working together to try and harness the strength of these things. So yes, there is a huge problem.
In fact, the tribal themselves will be very happy if forest is there, because without that they cannot be the forest dwellers. And the tribals cannot be called as a tribal because they live in tribes in an area which has been their own. And I know for long time, it has been a tradition with the tribals not to kill the animals in a way that will damage the entire environment. So I think there is some communication gap which we need to bridge.
There's a big communication gap because there are also different types of tribals. Under scheduled tribes, we also have huge amount of agriculturists. So we need to know which are the genuine tribals who are primitive tribals who live in different parts of India. You get them in Karnataka, you get them in Andhra, you get them in Andaman and Nicobar Islands where we have big forests. You can't create everybody in this group. So we needed clear thinking, detailed thinking on how to proceed. That didn't take place.
Now coming back to the government, one is the role of the civil society. In fact, I personally feel that, and I don't know whether you agree with this, that civil society could play a much larger role in terms of ensuring that this type of communication gap don't exist. They can play a big role in terms of shaping public opinion to let people know the impact of disappearance of forest, disappearance of tiger, and what impact is going to have on the people. Do you think the civil society needs to reorient and probably reposition themselves to play this important role in the changing atmosphere?
I think civil society needs to reorient themselves completely. They need to engage much more. They don't engage as much in the issues involved. So I believe there's a critical role for them to play in terms of the wilderness, in terms of the nature. Today, wildlife people are regarded, oh, they go to photograph tigers, they go to photograph wildlife, they're having a picnic and a holiday. This is not about holiday. This is about the essence of life. So civil society must engage in an understanding of this essence of life and then take it forward to the political leadership, to the bureaucratic leadership, that when you advise each other, please remember what you're dealing with. This is not some kind of tiger wala. People call me a tiger wala. I'm not a tiger wala. I've understood my country following the tail of the tiger because the tiger walks on the richest part of India. That's where your mines and minerals are. That's where your water is. That's where your medicinal plants are. That's where your natural treasures are. So my understanding of my country came following the tiger. So there's a much more holistic view to be imbibed by civil society for them to engage, to make sure that the beauty of this country's natural world is kept alive.
In fact, another way to look at the same issue is reviving our own traditions, because as you said earlier that, you know, our forefathers were wiser than what we are today, and therefore they made the tiger as a symbol of one of the goddess of the millions of people who worship her. And therefore tiger could have been protected because of the belief that we are protecting the vehicle on which the goddess Durga applied.
Definitely.
So do you think now we need to also link conservation to such traditional thinking?
I think it's important for us to encourage that traditional thinking, that the tiger is too sacred to all the communities that existed for anyone to harm it. It's like the god of India's forest. People have worshipped it for hundreds and hundreds of years. And all across Asia, the Chinese worshipped it, the Siberians worshipped it, in Indonesia, Cambodia, Vietnam, it's worshipped. And there were links in the worship. So we need to embody the worship and encourage it in awareness programs, in films, on Doordarshan, on television channels, that don't harm this animal. This animal is a part of our culture and tradition. It was even worshipped in Islamist communities. It was a great savior of mankind. It brought light on this earth. That was how people, it was the fertility symbol.
So actually this is something which are definitely not just in India but all over the world. Our forefathers were far more smarter, intelligent.